The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestones of Westminster Abbey as Catherine, Princess of Wales, adjusted her black mourning attire one final time. The weight of the moment pressed heavily on her shoulders, though she carried herself with the grace that had become her trademark over the years. Today was different from any other royal engagement she had attended. Today, the entire world would be watching, not just the usual crowd of royal enthusiasts and media personnel. She stood in the ornate chamber surrounded by centuries of history embedded in every stone wall and stained glass window. The air was thick with anticipation and grief, a combination that seemed to make breathing more difficult. Kate had always understood the significance of royal protocol, but this particular day demanded something beyond mere adherence to tradition. The monarchy itself seemed to hang in a delicate balance, teetering between ancient customs and the pressing need for modern relevance. Her mind wandered to the conversations she had shared with William just hours before. They had spoken in hushed tones about the challenges facing the royal family, the growing disconnect between the institution and the people it served. The younger generation of royals understood that change was not just inevitable, but necessary for survival. Yet change within the monarchy moved at the pace of glaciers, each modification carefully considered and debated through countless committees and advisors. Kate remembered her early days as a commoner, thrust into the spotlight of royal life. The learning curve had been steep, filled with countless etiquette lessons, protocol briefings, and media training sessions. She had transformed from a middle-class girl from Berkshire into one of the most photographed women in the world. But throughout this metamorphosis, she had never lost sight of her authentic self, the person who understood what it meant to live outside the gilded walls of palaces. The palace corridors buzzed with activity as staff members made final preparations for the day's events. Footsteps echoed against marble floors, creating a rhythmic soundtrack to the controlled chaos. Kate observed the dedicated individuals who worked tirelessly behind the scenes, many of whom had served the royal family for decades. Their loyalty and commitment reminded her of the human element that often got lost in discussions about the monarchy as an institution. As she prepared to leave for the main event, Kate caught her reflection in an antique mirror that had witnessed countless royal moments throughout British history. The woman looking back at her had evolved significantly from the university student who had first caught Prince William's attention. Lines of experience had begun to etch themselves around her eyes, testament to years of public service, motherhood, and the unique pressures that came with her position. Her thoughts turned to her children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, who were growing up in a world vastly different from the one she had known. They would inherit not just titles and privileges, but also the responsibility of keeping the monarchy relevant in an increasingly democratic and questioning society. The decisions made today, the gestures chosen, the words spoken or left unspoken, would all contribute to shaping the institution their children would one day serve. The weight of history seemed particularly heavy in this moment. Kate understood that royal gestures, no matter how small they might appear, carried significance far beyond their immediate context. A nod, a smile, a moment of silence, or in this case, what she was contemplating, could resonate through generations. The monarchy had survived wars, scandals, and social revolutions by adapting while maintaining its core essence. Today would test that delicate balance once again. She thought about the people who would be watching, not just in Britain, but around the world. There would be monarchists who cherished tradition, Republicans who questioned the institution's relevance, and millions of ordinary people who simply wanted to see their royal family as relatable human beings dealing with universal experiences of loss, love, and hope. The sound of approaching footsteps interrupted her contemplation. It was time to take her place in history, to make a choice that would either reinforce the status quo or signal a new chapter in the royal story. Kate straightened her shoulders, took a deep breath, and prepared to step into a moment that would be analyzed, discussed, and remembered long after she was gone. Her heart beat steadily as she moved toward the door, each step carrying her closer to a decision that felt both intensely personal and impossibly public. The silence that surrounded her in these final moments of preparation seemed to amplify every thought, every doubt, every hope she carried for the future of the institution she had married into and learned to serve with dedication and grace. The grand doors of Westminster Abbey opened to reveal a sea of faces, each one representing a different facet of British society and the wider Commonwealth. Kate stepped into the ancient cathedral, immediately feeling the weight of 1,000 eyes upon her. The Gothic architecture seemed to amplify every whisper, every rustle of fabric, creating an almost cathedral-like symphony of human presence and reverence. She took her designated place among the senior royals, her position carefully orchestrated, according to protocols that had been refined over centuries. To her left sat members of the extended royal family, their faces reflecting the same mixture of solemnity and uncertainty that she felt coursing through her own veins. To her right, she could see representatives from various Commonwealth nations, political leaders, and distinguished guests who had traveled from across the globe to witness this historic moment. The ceremony began with the traditional processional, music that had echoed through these same walls for generations of royal events. Kate listened to the familiar melodies, but today they seemed to carry a different resonance, as if the very stones of the abbey were aware that something significant was about to unfold. The music provided a backdrop to her racing thoughts as she mentally rehearsed the moment she had been contemplating for weeks. As the formal proceedings continued, Kate's attention was drawn to the faces in the congregation. She recognized many of them, long-serving members of Parliament, military officials in their dress uniforms, religious leaders representing various faiths, and carefully selected members of the public who represented different aspects of British life. Each face told a story, and together they formed a tapestry of the nation the royal family served. The Archbishop began his address, his voice carrying the weight of tradition and the gravity of the moment. His words spoke of duty, service, and the enduring nature of institutions that had weathered countless storms throughout British history. Kate found herself hanging on every word, not because she hadn't heard similar speeches before, but because today they seemed to speak directly to the decision she was contemplating. During a pause in the ceremony, Kate's eyes swept across the Abbey once more. She noticed the media representatives, their cameras discreetly positioned to capture every moment for posterity and immediate global consumption. She was acutely aware that her every expression, gesture, and movement would be analyzed by body language experts, royal watchers, and casual observers around the world. The pressure of this constant scrutiny had become second nature to her, but today it felt more intense than usual. Her mind drifted to conversations she had shared with other members of the royal family in recent months. There had been lengthy discussions about the monarchy's role in modern Britain, debates about tradition versus progress, and honest assessments of public sentiment toward the institution. These conversations had revealed a family grappling with questions that had no easy answers, trying to balance respect for history with the need for evolution. Kate remembered a particularly poignant conversation with Queen Elizabeth II, who had shared wisdom gained from decades of navigating the complexities of constitutional monarchy. The late Queen had spoken about moments when individual choices could influence the trajectory of the entire institution. She had emphasized that true leadership sometimes required stepping beyond the comfort zone of established protocol, but always with careful consideration of consequences. The ceremony reached a crucial juncture, and Kate felt her pulse quicken. This was approaching the moment she had identified as her opportunity to make a statement that transcended words. Around her, the congregation maintained the respectful silence that royal protocol demanded, but she could sense an undercurrent of anticipation, as if collectively they sensed that something significant was building. William, seated beside her, seemed to sense her tension. Their years of marriage had created an almost telepathic connection, allowing them to communicate volumes with the slightest glance or touch. He gave her an almost imperceptible nod, a gesture of support that reminded her that whatever decision she made, she would not face the consequences alone. The weight of her royal training pressed against her natural instincts. Years of protocol instruction had ingrained in her the importance of maintaining composure, following established procedures, and avoiding any action that might be interpreted as controversial or undignified. Yet her heart was telling her that this moment called for something beyond the usual royal response, something that would bridge the gap between the institution and the people it served. As the ceremony continued, Kate found herself thinking about the letters she received from ordinary citizens, messages that expressed both admiration and frustration with the royal family. Many writers expressed a desire to see the royals as more relatable, more human, more connected to the everyday experiences that shaped most people's lives. These letters had accumulated in her thoughts over months, creating a chorus of voices that seemed to be calling for authentic connection rather than distant formality. The moment was rapidly approaching, and Kate could feel her decision crystallizing with each passing second. The pivotal moment arrived with the subtle shift in atmosphere that Kate had learned to recognize during her years of royal service. The Archbishop's voice had taken on a different cadence, signaling the approach of the ceremony's most significant segment. Around her, the congregation seemed to lean forward collectively, as if sensing that history was about to unfold before their eyes. Kate's hands rested in her lap, her fingers intertwined in a gesture that appeared calm to observers, but concealed the trembling that had begun moments earlier. Her royal training had taught her to maintain composure under the most challenging circumstances, but this situation transcended anything she had previously experienced. The decision she was about to make would either be remembered as a moment of profound connection or criticized as a breach of royal protocol. The ceremony reached the point where traditional royal response was expected. For generations, members of the royal family had responded to this particular moment with dignified silence, a formal nod, or a brief, prescribed acknowledgement. The protocol was clear, established through decades of precedent, and deviation from it would be noticed immediately by royal watchers, protocol experts, and the media representatives documenting every second of the proceedings, instead of following the expected response. Kate made a choice that surprised everyone present. She rose from her seat, a movement that was not part of the established ceremony. The rustling of her dress seemed to echo through the abbey as hundreds of eyes turned toward her with expressions ranging from curiosity to concern. Palace officials, who had rehearsed every moment of the ceremony, looked momentarily confused by this departure from the planned sequence of events. What happened next would be replayed countless times on television screens around the world and analyzed by experts for years to come. Kate walked slowly toward the central aisle of the abbey, her steps measured and deliberate. Each footfall on the ancient stone floor seemed to resonate with significance, creating a rhythm that matched the collective heartbeat of the watching congregation. She paused at the point where the formal barriers between the royal section and the general congregation traditionally created a symbolic divide. For centuries, this invisible line had represented the separation between the monarchy and the people, a physical manifestation of the hierarchical structure that defined British society. Kate's pause at this threshold was brief but meaningful, as if she were acknowledging the weight of the boundary she was about to cross. Without fanfare or announcement, Kate stepped across this traditional divide and continued walking toward a section of the abbey where ordinary citizens were seated. The silence that had characterized the ceremony was replaced by a subtle shift in energy, a collective intake of breath as hundreds of people realized they were witnessing something unprecedented. Her destination became clear as she approached. an elderly woman seated in the third row of the general congregation. The woman, later identified as Margaret Thompson, was a retired nurse who had dedicated 40 years of her life to serving in National Health Service hospitals across London. She had been selected to attend the ceremony as a representative of healthcare workers, but she had never expected to interact directly with a member of the royal family. Kate stopped directly in front of Margaret, whose eyes widened with surprise and emotion. The Princess of Wales extended her hand, not in the formal manner prescribed by royal protocol, but in the natural human gesture that people use when offering comfort or connection. Margaret, initially overwhelmed by the unexpected interaction, hesitantly reached out to accept Kate's offered hand. The handshake that followed lasted longer than protocol would typically allow. Kate's grip was firm and warm, conveying a level of genuine connection that transcended the formal interactions, usually associated with royal engagements. She leaned slightly forward, bringing herself to Margaret's eye level, and spoke words that were inaudible to most of the congregation, but clearly moved the elderly woman to tears. The cameras captured every moment of this interaction, but they could not convey the electric atmosphere that filled the abbey. The congregation, initially uncertain about how to respond to this deviation from tradition, began to understand that they were witnessing a redefinition of what royal service could look like in the modern era. Kate's gesture continued as she moved to several other individuals in the general congregation, each interaction brief but intensely personal. She spoke with a young father who had lost his job during recent economic difficulties, shared a moment with a teacher who had worked in underfunded schools for decades, and acknowledged a military veteran whose service to the country had left him struggling with invisible wounds. Each interaction seemed to build upon the previous one, creating a crescendo of human connection that transformed the formal ceremony into something entirely different. The traditional barriers between royalty and subjects were dissolving before everyone's eyes, replaced by authentic moments of shared humanity that would be remembered long after the formal proceedings were forgotten. The ripple effects of Kate's unprecedented actions began immediately, spreading through the abbey like concentric circles on still water. Palace officials exchanged glances of barely concealed alarm, their carefully orchestrated ceremony having taken an unexpected turn that deviated dramatically from centuries of established protocol. Private secretaries whispered urgently into their communication devices, while security personnel subtly repositioned themselves to accommodate the princess's unscripted movements through the congregation. Senior members of the royal family watched, with a mixture of admiration and apprehension. Some recognized the courage required to break with tradition so publicly, while others worried about the precedent being set and the potential criticism that would inevitably follow. The delicate balance between tradition and modernization that the monarchy constantly navigated had been shifted dramatically by Kate's spontaneous decision to prioritize human connection over formal protocol. The Archbishop, a man who had officiated at countless royal ceremonies, demonstrated remarkable composure as he adapted his planned remarks to accommodate the unexpected interaction taking place in his cathedral. His decades of experience had taught him to expect the unexpected, but even he seemed moved by the genuine emotion that Kate's gestures had generated throughout the congregation. Media representatives worked frantically to capture every angle of the unfolding drama. Royal correspondents, who had covered hundreds of formal ceremonies, recognized immediately that they were witnessing something historically significant. Their live broadcasts carried Kate's actions to millions of viewers around the world, many of whom were seeing a side of the royal family they had never witnessed before. The international reaction was immediate and intense. Social media platforms exploded with commentary, video clips, and photographs of Kate's interactions with ordinary citizens. Hashtags began trending within minutes as people from different countries and cultures shared their interpretations of what they had witnessed. The imagery of a future queen stepping away from royal protocol to connect directly with her people resonated powerfully across diverse audiences. Back in the Abbey, Kate's actions continued to unfold with quiet dignity. Each person she approached, seemed initially shocked by the unexpected interaction, but their faces quickly transformed as they realized the sincerity of her gesture. These were not photo opportunities or carefully staged moments designed for media consumption, but authentic human connections that transcended the formal barriers that typically separated royalty from the general public. Margaret Thompson, the retired nurse who had been Kate's first stop, later described the encounter in interviews that would be broadcast around the world. She spoke of Kate's genuine interest in her decades of healthcare service, the princess's knowledge of current challenges facing the National Health Service, and most memorably, the warmth and humanity that characterized their brief but powerful exchange. The young father whom Kate had approached, James Morrison, found himself thrust into the international spotlight as news organizations sought to understand the significance of the princess's gesture. He described how Kate had asked about his family's challenges during recent economic difficulties, demonstrating an awareness of ordinary people's struggles that surprised and moved him. Their conversation, though brief, revealed a depth of understanding that challenged common perceptions about royal detachment from everyday concerns. Sarah Williams, the teacher who had dedicated her career to working in underfunded schools, became another focal point of media attention. She recounted how Kate had specifically acknowledged the challenges facing educators, expressing gratitude for their dedication despite difficult circumstances. The interaction highlighted the princess's awareness of social issues that affected millions of families across Britain. The military veteran, Colonel Robert Hayes, who had served multiple tours in Afghanistan, described his surprise at Kate's detailed knowledge of veteran affairs and her genuine concern for service members transitioning back to civilian life. Their exchange touched on issues of mental health support, employment challenges, and the often invisible struggles that military families faced long after their formal service had ended. As Kate completed her unscripted journey through the congregation and prepared to return to her official seat, the atmosphere in Westminster Abbey had been fundamentally transformed. What had begun as a formal ceremony conducted according to centuries-old traditions had evolved into something unprecedented in modern royal history. The congregation's energy had shifted from respectful observation to active engagement. People, who had expected to witness a traditional royal event, found themselves part of a redefinition of what royal service could look like in the 21st century. The invisible barriers that typically separated the monarchy from the people it served had been temporarily dissolved, replaced by genuine human connection. Palace communications teams, meanwhile, faced the immediate challenge of responding to global media inquiries about Kate's actions. The unscripted nature of her gestures made it impossible to provide prepared statements or explanations, forcing official spokespersons to acknowledge that they were witnessing something as unprecedented as everyone else. The ceremony's formal conclusion proceeded with heightened emotion and significance, as if everyone present understood they had participated in a historic moment that would be remembered and discussed for generations to come. The immediate aftermath of Kate's gesture created a media storm unlike anything the royal family had experienced in recent memory. Within hours of the ceremony's conclusion, news organizations around the world were leading with stories about the Princess of Wales's unprecedented break from royal protocol. Television networks interrupted their regular programming to analyze the significance of her actions, while newspapers prepared special editions to capture what many commentators were already calling a watershed moment for the British monarchy. Public reaction divided along predictable lines, but with surprising intensity on both sides. Traditional monarchists expressed concern about the precedent Kate had set, arguing that royal protocol existed for important reasons, and that deviation from established traditions could undermine the dignity and authority of the institution. Their letters to newspapers and calls to radio programs emphasized the importance of maintaining the mystique and formal distance that had historically characterized the relationship between royalty and subjects. Conversely, a much larger segment, of the public embraced Kate's actions with enthusiasm that surprised even seasoned royal watchers. Opinion polls conducted in the days following the ceremony showed overwhelming approval for her gesture of human connection, with particularly strong support among younger demographics who had previously expressed indifference or skepticism toward the monarchy. Social media campaigns celebrating her actions reached millions of people across multiple platforms. International media coverage further amplified the global significance of Kate's decision. American news networks drew parallels to significant moments in their own history when public figures had broken barriers to connect with ordinary citizens. European monarchies watched closely, recognizing that Kate's actions might pressure their own institutions to consider similar modernization efforts. Commonwealth nations, many of which maintained complex relationships with the British Crown, found themselves reassessing their connections to the monarchy in light of this demonstration of genuine human engagement. Behind the scenes at various royal residences, intense discussions were taking place about how to respond to the unprecedented situation. Senior advisors, constitutional experts, and communications specialists worked around the clock to craft responses that would acknowledge the positive public reaction while addressing concerns about protocol and precedent. These conversations revealed deep divisions within royal circles about the appropriate balance between tradition and modernization. The Archbishop of Canterbury, who had witnessed Kate's actions firsthand, became an important voice in the developing narrative. His public statements praised the princess's demonstration of Christian compassion and service, framing her gestures within religious contexts that resonated with many observers. His support provided crucial institutional backing for Kate's actions, helping to legitimize her break from protocol within religious and traditional frameworks. Queen Camilla and other senior royals faced immediate pressure to comment on Kate's actions. Their carefully worded statements attempted to strike a balance between supporting family unity and maintaining respect for established traditions. The delicate language of these responses was analyzed extensively by media experts, who noted subtle differences in tone and emphasis that revealed varying levels of comfort with Kate's unprecedented gesture. Meanwhile, the individuals Kate had approached during the ceremony found themselves at the center of international attention. Margaret Thompson, the retired nurse, became a symbol of public service and dedication, with media outlets exploring her 4 decades of healthcare work in detail. Her humble background and lifetime of service to others created a powerful narrative that resonated with audiences around the world. James Morrison, the unemployed father, became a focal point for discussions about economic inequality and the challenges facing working families. His story highlighted broader social issues that Kate's gesture had brought into sharp focus, sparking national conversations about government policies, social support systems, and the monarchy's role in addressing societal challenges. The teacher, Sarah Williams, found herself representing the entire education profession as media outlets explored the underfunding and resource challenges that characterized many British schools. Her interaction with Kate had lasted only minutes, but it became symbolic of the princess's awareness of issues affecting millions of families and children across the country. Colonel Robert Hayes, the military veteran, became a spokesperson for service members struggling with the transition back to civilian life. His conversation with Kate had touched on mental health challenges, employment difficulties, and the ongoing needs of military families, issues that gained renewed public attention following their interaction. Constitutional scholars and royal historians worked to place Kate's actions within the broader context of monarchical evolution. Their analyses explored precedents for royal protocol changes, examined the constitutional implications of her gesture, and debated whether her actions represented a natural evolution of royal service or a dangerous departure from established norms. The global conversation that emerged from Kate's gesture extended far beyond royal watching circles. Sociologists studied the public reaction to understand changing expectations of leadership and authority in democratic societies. Political scientists analyzed the implications for constitutional monarchy, as an institution, while communications experts examined how authentic human connection could reshape public perception of traditional institutions. As the initial shock of Kate's actions began to settle, longer-term questions emerged about what her gesture would mean for the future of the monarchy and her own role within it. 6 months after Kate's historic gesture at Westminster Abbey, the long-term impact of her actions had become clear, fundamentally altering the trajectory of the British monarchy and establishing new expectations for royal engagement with the public. The immediate controversy had given way to a broader transformation that extended far beyond the walls of royal palaces, influencing how democratic societies viewed traditional institutions and their capacity for meaningful evolution. The most significant change was evident in public polling data that showed a dramatic increase in support for the monarchy, particularly among demographics that had previously expressed indifference or opposition to the institution. Young adults, ethnic minorities, and working-class communities reported feeling more connected to the royal family than at any point in recent decades. Kate's gesture had successfully bridged a gap that had been widening for years, demonstrating that authentic human connection could overcome institutional barriers. The royal family's approach to public engagements had evolved considerably in response to Kate's pioneering example. While maintaining respect for important traditions and constitutional requirements, other family members began incorporating more spontaneous interactions with ordinary citizens into their official duties. Prince William adopted a more relaxed approach to walkabouts, spending additional time in genuine conversation with members of the public rather than simply exchanging brief pleasantries. International monarchies took notice of the British example, with several European royal families implementing similar changes to their own public engagement strategies. The Swedish, Norwegian, and Dutch royal families all reported increased public approval following their adoption of more accessible and human-centered approaches to royal service. Kate's influence had sparked a quiet revolution in monarchical institutions across multiple countries. The individuals Kate had approached during the ceremony experienced life-changing impacts from their brief interactions with the princess. Margaret Thompson, the retired nurse, became a prominent advocate for healthcare workers' rights and was eventually appointed to a government advisory committee on health service reform. Her expertise and Kate's endorsement had elevated her voice in national healthcare discussions. James Morrison, the unemployed father, received multiple job offers following media coverage of his interaction with Kate. More importantly, his story had inspired new government initiatives focused on supporting families during economic transitions. The employment challenges he had faced became a catalyst for policy discussions that resulted in expanded job training programs and family support services. Sarah Williams, the dedicated teacher, found herself consulting with education policymakers and speaking at international conferences about the challenges facing public education. Her interaction with Kate had amplified her voice in education reform discussions, leading to increased funding for schools in underserved communities and recognition of teachers' crucial role in society. Colonel Robert Hayes, the military veteran, became a leading advocate for improved veteran services and mental health support for former service members. His conversation with Kate had highlighted issues that resulted in expanded government programs for military families and increased awareness of the ongoing challenges faced by those who had served their country. The media's coverage of Kate's gesture had evolved from initial shock and analysis to deeper exploration of the issues her actions had highlighted. News organizations began dedicating more resources to covering social issues, economic inequality, and public service challenges that had gained visibility through her interactions with ordinary citizens. The quality of public discourse around these topics improved significantly as media attention brought expert voices and personal stories together in meaningful ways. Constitutional experts and historians eventually concluded that Kate's actions represented a natural evolution of monarchical service rather than a dangerous departure from tradition. They noted that successful monarchies throughout history had demonstrated the ability to adapt to changing social expectations while maintaining their essential character and constitutional role. Her gesture was placed within a historical context of royal innovation and adaptation. The long-term impact on Kate herself was perhaps the most profound transformation of all. Her confidence in breaking from protocol when human connection demanded it had established her as a leader within the royal family and a voice for modernization that respected tradition while embracing change. Public perception of her evolved from dutiful royal spouse to genuine advocate for the people she served. Palace communication strategies were permanently altered by the success of Kate's authentic gesture. The careful scripting and rigid protocol that had previously characterized royal events gave way to more flexible approaches that allowed for spontaneous moments of genuine connection. This change resulted in more positive media coverage and stronger public engagement with royal activities. The anniversary of Kate's gesture became an unofficial day of reflection on the relationship between traditional institutions and modern democratic values. Schools incorporated discussions of her actions into civics lessons, while community organizations used the date to highlight the importance of public service and human compassion in leadership roles. Kate's silent gesture had indeed echoed through history, creating ripple effects that continued to influence British society, international monarchical institutions, and public expectations of leadership long after the moment itself had passed. Her decision to prioritize human connection over rigid protocol had proven that authentic leadership could transform institutions, bridge social divides, and create lasting positive change in democratic societies. The moment that had begun with a simple decision to step away from her designated seat had evolved into a redefinition of what royal service could accomplish in the 21st century, establishing Kate as a transformational figure whose influence would be felt for generations to come.